In the early 1980s, anthropologists observed the development of a new phenomenon in the Congo Basin, and more specifically in the Democratic Republic of Congo, that targets young children and adolescents living in poverty-stricken urban areas. These youth, often demarcated by physical and psychological abnormalities and asocial tendencies, have been accused of possessing magical powers or partaking in acts of witchcraft. Their involvement in witchcraft is believed to cause economic insecurity, political instability, widespread disease such as malaria, and global epidemics such as HIV/AIDS, all of which have afflicted the Congolese population for the past 30 years. For the purpose of this presentation, I will discuss how the appearance of these alleged child witches conforms to the physical description of the monster as described by Hewitt. I will also examine the role of the monster in society as described by Cohen, and more specifically how the emergence of the child witch phenomenon is a direct result of the turbulent economic, social, and political landscape of the Democratic Republic of Congo from the 1980s to present day. The Congolese peoples identified child witches by abnormalities in their appearance and behavior that distinguish them from mainstream society. Oftentimes, these youth are born with some sort of physical deformity, such as albinism, a swollen belly, or red eyes, exhibit an illness that manifests itself physically, such as epilepsy or tuberculosis, or are diagnosed with a mental disorder, such as autism or Down syndrome. In particular, twins and children who are unusually gifted are suspected of partaking in acts of witchcraft. Orphaned children who place a financial burden on their relatives are also prime suspects in witchcraft activities. The Congolese portrayal of child witches corresponds to scholarly descriptions of the monster. Hewitt explains that early monsters were distinguished by their lack of an essential body part or the presence of an additional member. Other monsters were marred by symbols imprinted on their strange physiologies. Although the child witches of Congo do not usually have any additional body parts or lack any normal body part, they are atypical, physically or socially different from the rest of society, and are therefore treated as outcasts. Cohen suggests that monsters are a manifestation of society's fear of the other. He asserts that monsters differ from the majority of the population in just one way, but are still perceived as menacing and evil creatures because of the human fear of the unknown. Cohen observes that monsters tend to develop at a metaphorical crossroads of a society, in the midst of a cultural or political movement. Even before the 1980s, which marks the beginning of the child witch phenomenon, the Democratic Republic of Congo endured much hardship. The post-independence years following Joseph Mobutu's coup d'etat in 1965 represented a period of hope and led to the development of an authentic African state in which traditional African values were promoted over Western ones. Mobutu's speeches about the Africanization of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which he referred to by its African name, the Republic of Zaire, inspired millions of Congolese peoples, especially the youth. However, the development of an authentic African state that promised wealth and prosperity for all was soon revealed to be false. In fact, the term kleptocracy, or rule by thieves, is believed to have originated during the Mobutu regime. While the ruling elite gained wealth rapidly, the majority of the Congolese population sank deeper into poverty. Furthermore, the social changes that followed the rise of capitalism and urbanization had a profound effect on the traditional family and kinship relations, which were formerly interdependent. In response to these new social circumstances, tensions developed between the elderly and the youth, parents and children, brothers and sisters. The children in the Congolese community were traditionally viewed as an investment. The adults worked to provide food, shelter, and schooling for the children in their community and would reap the rewards in their old age, when these children would reciprocate and take care of their elderly relatives as well as support the new generation of children. However, socioeconomic changes, particularly in regards to paid employment, have affected the legitimacy of parental authority within the typical Congolese family unit. Children have become assertive and individualized, often securing jobs but giving nothing back to their communities. These overly individualized individuals are often accused of witchcraft. Similarly, failure in school or at the workplace can also be explained in terms of witchcraft and is attributed to jealous relatives. These denunciations are often accompanied by the phrase, "the danger comes from the village." Research conducted in Congo indicates that an increase in the number of orphans is a direct result of violent political conflicts, such as civil wars and coups d'etats, institutional crises such as the lack of health and schooling services, and economic and social crises, all of which occurred during President Mobutu's regime. Orphan children often find themselves living with a member of their extended family, and, when possible, with a relative who already has children. In their host families, the children may be treated differently from the couple's legitimate children. These tensions can lead to acts of violence in situations where families are under severe financial stress. When the orphaned child is already unwanted, forced upon a family, and considered a burden, suspicion of witchcraft serves as a valid reason to relieve the family of their responsibility to care for their foster child. The testimony of Esther, age 13, reveals the tensions within her family. Esther never knew her mother. She was abandoned by her father and accused of witchcraft by her half-brothers and sisters. One day, my stepmother felt ill after a 2-day prayer vigil. She had pain in her stomach. Her brother said I had bewitched her. I didn't know what they were talking about. I denied it, but no one wanted to listen to me. They just kept on accusing me. In addition, wars and political struggles have given rise to a relatively new phenomenon that has radically altered traditional representations of the child in the urban context, the child soldier. The employment of child soldiers has become a widespread practice due to technological innovations that have made weapons lighter, the changing nature of conflict, and massive social disruptions that have left millions of children homeless and thus vulnerable to involuntary recruitment practices. The child, once viewed as a fragile and vulnerable being, now represents real danger. It is important to note that the involvement of children in the urban public space transcends children in military or conflict situations. As already discussed, children have begun to acquire greater financial power than their parents and thereby also occupy a place in the economic sphere. The main power attributed to child witches is their ability to harness powers from the invisible world and inflict harm on individuals in the earthly realm. In general, this harm consists of transmitting an illness to a member of kin who must be sacrificed in order for the witch to become even more powerful. In order to explain the harsh living conditions and increasing number of deaths that occurred during Mobutu's corrupt regime, the Congolese society have targeted children, accusing them of performing witchcraft, cursing their kin, and causing diarrhea, malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV/AIDS, and the fatal consequences that almost inevitably follow these medical problems. In addition, child witches are blamed for bringing about general misfortune, poverty, unemployment, and failure. Levi Strauss suggests that monsters were developed by society to provide some sign of reasoning for mysterious phenomena that cannot otherwise be understood. It appears that by condemning child witches, the Congolese peoples are essentially creating a new monster to understand the misfortune that has recently begun to harm their community. While child witchcraft is a relatively recent phenomenon in Congo, it should have been almost expected due to the turbulent political, economic, and social landscape in the past 30 years. Societies around the world have created monsters to express their fears, to explain the unexplainable, and to account for widespread disease, disaster, and death. Congo is no exception.